Welcome to the Draft Deeper podcast. This is your host, Nathan Grubel. Joining me, as always, is my producer, Kevin Black. I keep saying December has been my favorite month of doing this podcast for a great reason. The guests that I've had on this show, if you've missed any of the previous podcasts, please go back and listen to them because they were truly fantastic. But I had Chad Ford on in the middle of the month. Then I had Seth Partnow on to talk about his new book, The Midrange Theory. And we're wrapping up December with, honestly, one of my favorite people that I've truly enjoyed listening to this year, specifically talk about the draft. He does episodes of the Game Theory podcast with Sam Pacini, specifically covering the draft. Mr. Matt Pennie. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm great. That was a wonderful intro, and it's a huge step down from Chad Ford and Seth Partnow, who are literary magnets, and I'm just some dummy who tweets out stuff and people say I'm right or I'm wrong. But nonetheless, I'm happy to be here. You guys do awesome stuff, awesome work. One of the accounts and people and groups and collections where I feel like when I wake up the next morning, you've already beat everybody to the punch. There's already a video, there's already a take, there's already a grouping, a graphic, and that's motivation to me to actually go out and watch more film too. So I'm a fan of your guys' work, so I'm happy to join you here on the show.
Matt's referring to the No Ceilings team, which if you haven't subscribed yet to the No Ceilings Substack, please definitely go do so. NoCeilings.substack.com. You can find links on all of our social media channels. Yeah, Matt, sometimes it's crazy. I will be fully started into my workday, and we'll be sharing like 3 or 4 or 5 different pieces on like one day that I didn't even know were going out. So I'm trying to like share all this content, and I'm just like, yeah, I give up. I can't do it. Like I got to hammer this thing out for work, and I'll come back to this later.
You guys are a wagon too. There's also a graphics department, or one of you guys is really good at that. That there's always kind of good WWF, WWE inspired takes and Roy Will. I don't know. You're really good.
So Corey Talaba is the head of our graphics department. He does incredible work. Tyler Rucker, Backcourt Violation, is our meme king. He posts gifts to essentially every possible thing you could respond to on social media to keep it light, keep it friendly. So we do have a full team, and I appreciate anyone who has taken the time to shout out or enjoy some of our work. That truly means everything to me. So thank you, Matt, for making some of those kind comments in return. So before we get too deep into some of the draft content that we do, Matt, why don't you give my audience a little mini backstory as to your place in evaluation and how you've found yourself in the scouting world, the basketball world as a whole?
Kind of by accident, which I think kind of happens for a lot of people. I was if you start and turn the clock way back, I played in high school. I was injured my senior year, so I ended up going to UMass. I majored in the sport management program. I was a manager for a year, then ended up walking on. I played 3 seasons. After that, I went and coached in prep school. And when I was at prep school, I just developed a lot of relationships with college coaches and assistant coaches who would kind of ask for my take on players. And if you're at events, who do you like? Who do you see? Like, how does this fit for what we're doing? And from Northfield Mount Hermon, when I was a prep school coach, I then graduated on to work for Reebok in their grassroots events, and now Under Armour for the last 5 years. So because of that, I've been in the gym a lot. And when you build these kind of trusted sources and allies in the space, it just kind of developed out of that into, I had more NBA teams reaching out. I had more people reaching out for kind of consulting stuff. I was always a fan of the draft growing up. And sort of like with the college coach thing, I just formalized what I was doing anyway to kind of put there out some forward-facing stuff. And then to get locked on to the Game Theory podcast was also an accident. It was, man, pandemic's never going to end, but I think it was like 2 years ago. I was furloughed. I was home for 5 months with my son, and I had a mutual friend with Sam who just said, "Hey, you guys should connect and maybe like, just talk about some consulting stuff you can do, some side spinoffs of businesses." And we started talking about the UAA, and that's the Under Armour Association on the grassroots circuit. And Sam was just picking my brain about, we had Anthony Edwards, we had Precious Achua, we had Josh Green, Nico Mannion from that draft class. We talked for like an hour, and he's about to hang up. He's like, "Hey, we should do a podcast next week." So I hang up and I'm like, I don't even really listen to podcasts. Like, I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, if you want to, if this is like a dead time for you, like you had a guest who couldn't do it, sure. we did one, recorded it, and said, "Hey, that was great. Let's do another." And I think he had somebody go and get an NBA scouting job, and I've just continued to be on, and he can't shake me. So long-winded way of saying that I was just kind of always in the gym and taking notes and working events, and it just escalated into where I'm at now, doing more draft stuff, and once in a while, people listen. So I've been fortunate. It's hard, and people always say like, "Well, how do you make this a full time thing?" I don't know. I mean, like you guys, I have a real job. I'm still trying to figure out and navigate that space. A lot of fun in the process.
Well, Matt, that was an exciting backstory and a big reason why. No, it's a big
Yeah,
reason why I wanted to have you on this podcast because I reached out and one of the topics specifically I wanted to discuss with you, and we have a handful of players that we're going to talk about here, were guys who started out, I would say, fairly high on the majority of consensus preseason big boards, and a lot of them have slid in the space of popular opinion. For some of them have slid just slightly, and a few of them have slid in a major way. And part of doing that evaluation and kind of grasping the full context as to where we're going is also understanding the grassroots aspect of it and where these guys came from. And looking back at a preseason ranking, generally a lot of that information factored into your evaluation before you started to see a lot of the college work. So that's very important to be able to lean back on and understand. And that's why I can't wait to hear some of the thoughts that you have on these prospects. I also not only did I listen to you on the Game Theory podcast, of course, Matt, but I also heard you do a guest spot on a mutual friend of the program, Chuck, with Chucking Darts.
chucking
And
darts. Yeah, the best.
thank God you guys. Every time I do a podcast with Chuck, we're going for like 2 hours plus. Like lock it in. Like it's just going to be a long form essay. You guys kept it to an hour, so
Well,
good on your
it
part.
was it was an hour almost by accident. I told him it was like 8 at night. I said, "Look, I got like 8 to 10. I'm only allowed to burn the midnight oils and do this kind of like I don't want to say pet project, but this is like the passion thing for me. This is like my playing Fortnite. This is like my going out and playing golf. I don't do that. I don't. I'm not trying to steal John Rothstein's line here, but I don't have hobbies. I just talk about the NBA draft. So when we were recording, it actually his feed kept like twitching out a little bit. So we had to restart like 5 times. That could have been 2 or 3 hours because we still had many prospects to talk about, which I'm sure we'll get to. But he's just another good guy in the space that like you guys put in the work and you tell he actually watches the tape and the film and has real opinions based on that stuff and not just looking at box scores and highlights.
Oh, Chuck is an excellent friend of the program. He will. I was on his show at the beginning of the year. I think he's going to be coming on mine within the next few weeks. So I can't wait for a more long form conversation with Chuck. He has opinions on guys. I sometimes I just can't get to where he's at, and so it's always nice rehashing some of that and revisiting some of those guys with him and kind of getting his opinion. Maybe he offers up a take or points me in a different direction that I didn't even think about or didn't dive deep enough
Yeah.
around the rabbit hole. So it's really nice to have that conversation. But let's start. Let's start with the guy who's probably generated the most buzz over the last few weeks in particular, and that would be AJ Griffin. Now,
Yes.
AJ Griffin came into the draft cycle already with concerns. He was essentially injured and really didn't partake in much full basketball activity for like a year and a half. So it was already a rocky start coming in. And then you hear some of the rumblings about why he's not playing a ton of minutes at Duke, why he's not coming in and contributing, when in all likelihood, if you're just going back and evaluating AJ Griffin on the high school stuff and you take that into account, you're coming into the year, at least I did, saying raw talent, he's probably like a top 5 raw talent in the draft class. But you just hear some of the things and you see that he's not getting the minutes, he's not able to produce and show what he can do on the court, and that leads a lot of people to slide him down draft boards pretty rapidly. And normally I'm not one to completely overreact to everything that's going on, but I also moved him down my board. I believe in the first iteration of my big board, I had him at 21.
Yep.
And that seemed to be lining up with a lot of consensus. So we have certain segments, Matt, that we're going to break these guys down through certain lenses to look through. But let's just start with the very simple. Where were you on AJ Griffin preseason, and where are you at with him now?
I had him in the lottery the preseason. I think somewhere in that 8 to 10 range. And for all these guys and kind of the grassroots spin that I have on this, they're all data points. And I don't think one is be all end all. And there's another guy we're talking about a little bit, and I'll kind of tell you what I mean by that. But like this is a chapter in the story. It's not the whole book. You can't just pick up and read chapter 6 and be like, this book stinks. You throw it out. You got to read before. You got to read after. There's a lot of development stuff here. With AJ, he did have his obstacles in high school, like you alluded to with his injuries. He dislocated his knee in January of his junior year, and he missed the rest of the season. The following year, coronavirus hits, and New York high school, and he goes to Archbishop Stepinac, or attended there. They don't have a season until the spring. He opted out for a different injury for his ankle, and at the time, he's training with his dad, Adrian Griffin, who's an assistant coach for the Raptors, in Tampa, because in Canada they had the bordering travel thing where you couldn't go back and forth. So he's down there working out, and you can tell because without those injuries, I really like his frame at 6'6", 220
Hmm.
pounds. It's a good blend of power and finesse. He showed he has the takeover ability when he was healthy. And then on the court, when he wanted to be a takeover guy, like he has it. But it's not all the time, but he has it when he needs to be. I never
Yep.
question his skill set. And then when he gets to Duke, and we talked about the preseason hubbub and playing next to Paulo and Trevor Keels and all these other guys coming back, and Wendell Moore and Mark Williams, gets injured again. So he misses time in the preseason, and you can tell that the Duke staff is working back in slowly, but it's really slowly. Is it a trust thing? Is it an effort thing? I don't know. I'm not in that locker room. But he doesn't play 20 minutes until the 5th game of the year, which they beat Lafayette by 30, and he goes nuts in garbage time. He has the last 4 minutes, he shot 7 for 10 from the field, 4 for 6 from 3. Then he
Hmm.
has this run of 3 games where he plays 11 minutes, 6 minutes, 2 minutes versus Ohio State. He's combined 2 points. And now we're on this newer run against South Carolina State, App State, Elon, and Virginia Tech. It's 20 minutes a night, 19 points, 11 points, had 5, had 13. And there's more of that AJ Griffin that old scouts and definitely draft Twitter fell for. So I don't know where we go from here. I don't want to get too crazy. I'm not somebody who says I'm sticking to my guns. I have him 3rd overall. I kind of have him in the 20 range right now, but have to see what it looks like in ACC play. Have to see what it looks like in the tournament. Have to see if we build on what the minutes have been at this point. But definitely a confusing evaluation for where we're at right now.
So let's say that this trend, this recent trend continues. AJ Griffin is getting considerable playing time relative to what he was playing previously. He's on the kick where he's 20, 25 minutes per game. Maybe he actually breaks into the starting lineup, which if he does break into that starting lineup, and you're talking about like Trevor Keels and AJ Griffin and Paolo Banchero, Mark Williams, like good luck scoring on that Duke team when they're all locked in defensively. That's just so much size and athleticism on the court at once. But let's say some of these numbers hold up because when he does play, when he gets in those ranges of 19 plus minutes per night, Matt, he's producing it in a big way. And some of the numbers, I know that he doesn't have the most diverse shot profile that we can talk about on Synergy, but essentially every play type where he's registering enough attempts to actually rank in a percentile, he's knocking every single thing out of the park. And you can obviously see that on the film. He's very comfortable getting spots, hitting mid range pull ups. He could finish around the basket. The 3-point shot has been a little hit or miss, but when he's on, I mean, you talk about a heat check guy, like he is on. And then I think he started to find himself on the defensive end as well. You see some of the potential he has there. His footwork's gotten a lot better. He's sticking with guys. He's playing better angles. And you just evaluate him broad, like a 6'6", a 225-pound guard who just looks like he belongs. And I specifically remember somebody sharing on Twitter one of the shots he hit. I think it was in his second to last game where he drove up and he went into kind of like a little post move and then he faded and he got so high up on that shot and he knocked it down with what looked like such ease, but in reality, you sit back and you watch that shot and you go, how many other guys in this draft class can
Right.
realistically hit a shot like that? So that's what leaves me so intrigued. But even if he keeps up this level of play, all the injury history, Matt, that you outlined, are teams actually going to gamble like a top 7 pick on him, even if the talent warrants taking him that high?
I don't know because some of that stuff will definitely be dependent on the medical. He could be fine. Like a lot of times, guys just have nagging injuries, but they're not going to carry over forever. And sometimes you'll get guys in the draft where a doctor or medical staff will red flag him, say, no, we're not taking him. But another team may say, hey, our doctor said it's good enough, it's close enough, we like the talent. Top 7, maybe ambitious. We've seen crazier things. I don't think backing the lottery is too nuts. It's just it's different because frankly, what Wendell Moore is doing is what I thought AJ Griffin would be doing, and vice versa. And a lot of AJ's offense right now is off threes, like you said, or cuts. He had that big dunk against Virginia
Yep.
Tech, and it pops because, like, oh my god, like this guy's been on the bench, and they have this. This is an embarrassment of riches and resources for Duke because the way his frame is and how physical he can be and rebound and start the offense. And I mean, as a compliment, where when he catches the ball, it's sort of like a workout NBA move type of skill set. Like he catches it, it's a pump fake, it's one hard dribble, he extends, he pushes out in front of him. He doesn't try to do too much. The shot I think is good enough. I mean, he has a really wide base if you notice, but he's in like the
Hmm.
97th percentile on all jumpers. He feels comfortable with it. I'm just a little bit leery on leaning on the synergy numbers for him right now because a lot of his work has been done when they're up 25 and it's over. Now, Virginia Tech,
Yep.
different, right? But if you're beating up on Lafayette, you're beating up on South Carolina State, it's not only just like the level of competition, you might even be playing like their second string guys, and Duke's kind of pulled off the dogs a little bit, and you can go nuts, and nobody really cares too much, and those synergy numbers hit. But I just want to wait a little bit longer to see you're playing on the road at North Carolina. You're playing bigger, longer athletic wings in 17 minutes a night. And if it translates there, sure, we can talk about having him 14, 15. I don't know if he's like, I'm going to the draft at all costs. I'm also just, I don't know where to slot him right now. And with big boards, we're all guilty of it, right?
Yep.
But it's like I get having a big board right now, but just so much is left to be played. If you're a freaky deaky and you're Chet, Jabari, Paulo, Jaden Ivey, those guys, some top 4, understood. I don't know what else we need to watch. We can argue about who's 1, 2, 3, 4, or give somebody else for AJ, for Pat Baldwin, for Johnny Davis, for Keegan Murray. I still want to see what it looks like in conference play.
I agree with you 100% wholeheartedly. We do need to see a larger sample size. If there were like one or two things specifically, Matt, to pick out about his game that you kind of want to see more of in a larger sample size, to like, okay, this is definitely going to work. This is going to translate better to the NBA. This is going to pick him on my board. Like, what would one or two of those things be in your opinion?
It's consistency, and you can put that whatever, but just knowing when you're putting a guy out on the floor, what you're getting every night, whether that's 15 minutes, 25 minutes, 10 minutes, you don't know if you're going to get the AJ Griffin superhero out there when he rises up and dunks. And I think the shot you're alluding to too is he jumps in the air, he squares himself up. It's a high release. It's hard to block. He gets out, he runs the wing wide, can spot, can shoot, can pump fake, dribble, look opposite, defend, active, getting in lanes. But just is he going to be able to be that guy every single night for 15 to 20 minutes a night, or are we going to revert back to the guy that had 2 points over the course of like 3 games?
Fair enough. I think that's an absolutely fair place to leave AJ Griffin. He's going to be one of those guys to definitely monitor as the draft process goes on. I agree with you, Matt. Doing big boards this early is a stupid exercise in my opinion, and I think Tyler Rucker agrees with that as well. Like we're like chatting in our private group, and he's like, "Why are you guys making me do a big board in December?" Well, because we got to give the people what they want.
Exactly,
Not for
exactly.
my health, but
We're crowd pleasers. They wanna see it in poke holes immediately because there's a large contingent that will yell at you if you have Adrian Griffin not in the top 5, and then probably an equal one if you do. You can't win. I talked about this with, someone does rankings for team stuff, for high school team stuff, and they said it's just creating interactions and controversy more than anything. It's fun. You put it out there, and as soon as you post a poll, somebody's going to complain about why is Purdue third? Why is North Carolina still ranked? Why is Gonzaga second? It creates more drama and buzz for people to tune into, whether it's your program, your Twitter feed, your website. So there's still benefits for it, despite us catching a lot of bow and arrows for it.
that being said, though, I mean, before we move into the next guy here, this draft class, I don't know if it feels the same way for you, Matt. It just feels so much more open than it
Oh yeah,
has in
no
previous
question.
years. Like I got 11 guys that I'm down to. And AJ Griffin would actually be one of those guys, whether that's a hot take or not. Guys that I'm confident, like by the end of the year, this is going to be a good section of my lottery. This is how my lottery is essentially going to form up. But like everything like 12 and on, I'm just like constantly going back and forth every single night trying to look this over. And even like trying to grade guys out from a tier perspective, I'm still going back and forth between some of those middling tiers. So it just seems so wide open. I'm assuming you feel the same way.
Maybe that's the way I have to do it. I have to tier it out a little bit better because just tied to one number, I'm having a hard time. I had a similar issue last year, the last draft too. Just like what do you kind of do 7 to looking at my board now 14. Then after that, like I feel okay because
Mhm.
it's less of a guy you need to produce and win right now. You're in the lottery, like you really need for the most part. Then there's different circumstances. You need a contributor, like you need somebody to help you get over the hump. So it's splitting. Does that mean an older guy like Ochai Agbaji, who has a great body and has turned it around, is averaging 20 points per game, and then you look at the NBA and say, well, he's Corey Kispert's pretty old and he's had a good game or two, but I don't know if he's necessarily the guy that's pushed Washington over where they need to be. Or do you go younger and say, hey, Jalen Duren's really young. He hasn't been great, but he has a chance if we're just a little
Yep.
bit patient. Maybe Memphis isn't showing him. So it's a lot of it too. I feel is philosophical, even more so franchise by franchise too.
I'm trying to give myself a little bit of a break. This is going to be a big week for me in terms of deep diving film because I have so much time off from work, like you and I talked about before we started the show. So this is really my week to dig in. I'm trying to give myself a little bit of a reprieve from watching a little more Memphis film. I've obviously seen a few games, and I was in person. I
Yes.
was in person for their game again in Brooklyn against Virginia Tech. That
Oh
was
boy,
man,
that
that
was an
that was hard
interesting
to
one.
watch.
Yeah, I had a few texts from scouts like I'm here and not I forget what was going on. Was champion not cha- the Vegas game was going on at the same time, right?
Yep.
I had a few scouts being like, "Why am I here and not there?" I'm like, I don't know, man. You don't work for me. You tell me. I think those guys. I think Jalen and Monty had a combined 0 points at halftime. Like that was the graphic. Like I was tuning into that rather than something else. Young. These guys. A lot of them are very young. You don't know what you're gonna get.
Absolutely. And speaking of another young quote unquote blue chipper that we can move into, the next guy that we had on our list to talk about would be Caleb Houstan out of Michigan, who, if you would look about preseason rankings across the majority of major outlets, and by the way, if anyone in my audience or anyone listening because they want to hear Matt and not me, if you have not seen Corey Tullipa's work on our No Ceiling Substack regarding the draft stock market price updates and the draft stock market rankings that he's doing, it is the most, I tell him all the time, it's the most unique piece of draft content that exists on the internet. And it's a resource where everybody can publish their big boards, but we don't always have the easiest way to go back and sort of look where everybody was at different points throughout the year. Corey is going to be cataloging this as we go on throughout the year. I believe he's going to try to do monthly updates to this. So Caleb Houston's preseason stock price, so about an average of major boards like ESPN, Bleacher Report, Tankathon, Sports Illustrated, etc. His average price was 6.8. So he was coming in anywhere between 6 to 7 on major boards. Now you see the slide coming in that he's averaging out about 16. So we're talking out of the lottery. That's a drastic fall.
Yeah,
So
but semi warranted too, right? It's like
yep,
a lot of stuff he had coming in. I also thought one and done kind of had him in that 7 to 10 range. I currently have him at 18. Had the big rep coming out of Mount Ford Academy, and he played FIBA with the Canadian national team at 6'9", a pretty good feel. When I saw him in high school, he was a great shooter. He was on an absolutely loaded team. He didn't have to do a ton, but when they hit him, he was a floor spacer, and he stretched the floor.
yep,
He's able to open up driving lanes for guys like Dariq Whitehead and other players that were around him. And then he plays for Canada this summer, and he averaged 17 and 6. He facilitated a lot, but he shot it poorly. He was 11 for 58 for 19%. It's a small sample, and he did shoot 50% from three, 85% from the free throw line. So you give it a little bit of a hand wave, right? And you get the preseason,
yep.
and it's a little bit like the reports I had from scouts and media people who were there, who were at Ann Arbor, said, I don't know if he's really the sharpshooter. It's not. as fluid. It's not as fast as we thought. And there were some questions about what the hype was all about. And the year starts, he's slow too. He made some threes, but that was about it. He had the breakout slump buster game, I guess, against Tarleton State, where he had 14 points. He was 4 of 7 from the field, had 2 rebounds. He is up to 37% from three. The 6 games since the Tarleton State game, he shot 50% from three on almost 4.5 attempts per game. So, like you said, like, what do you do? I mean, more shots are falling. I still worry about the foot speed, the separation. Like, he'll get one of those pin down screens and still not even separate himself enough to prevent his shot being blocked or altered. Or when he comes off, he sort of goes like back to the action as opposed to like keeping going away from it. So even he's shooting 40+% from three, I'm
Yeah.
worried still about that NBA translation. He's been driving the ball better. He's been better at keeping his man on his hip than finishing high, or like a short, quick, like head and shoulders fake to the rim, then keeps going. No brain NBA player. I don't see the top five ascension come back as it could for a couple of these other guys, like maybe AJ. So I don't know. I mean, my last note is I watch him play that stretch four role or even the three at times with Hunter Dickinson and Musa Diabate, and I also think that, man, Franz Wagner was really good. Like,
He,
he was really
he
he's,
was
like, somehow
really good.
underappreciated. People are like, "Well, he just kinda, like, cuts, he makes these quick little passes, this, that." It was so seamless, and Franz transition to the NBA has also been seamless. That's another pod for another day. So I'm figuring out Caleb Houstan just like everybody else. He's still a first roundish pick. Just I don't know if it's necessarily the upside that we anticipated in the preseason.
So I flip on the tape. I'm with you in terms of the jump shooting, Matt. I'm not concerned about the shot, the movement shooting. I'm not concerned about any of that, especially when he's wide open in the corner. He's one of those guys who you always know you're going to be able to pass him the ball, and you have a reasonable to an upward level of confidence that he's going to knock down that shot. I'm not concerned about it. My issue with Caleb Houstan is really what he does in terms of creating offense, not
Yep.
necessarily just for others, because he has proven to be a good passer. That was one of the things that I think intrigued a lot of people watching the U19s was what he was able to do from a passing perspective,
Yeah,
even at pick
absolutely.
and roll. That has translated so far actually at Michigan. He rates out in the 71st percentile in terms of pick and rolls, including passes. However, when he's asked to do anything else out of the pick and roll, the results are not pretty. And you can just tell he does not have that next level burst initially coming off the screen. And then when he gets too deep into the paint, I know you alluded to some of the things where he's actually gotten a little bit better finishing, but for me, I just don't see that type of guy who I'm trusting to definitely finish everything around the basket after he's turning off that screen. And I also he has not shown me an ability to create like a 1-2 dribble pull up off the bounce and make something like that part of his arsenal as well. He's only attempted 7 shots off the dribble and he's only hit 2 out of 7 of them. So it's not just he hasn't made them. It's also he's not even looking
Taking him.
to really take them. Yeah, and he can't. He just can't create the separation. Like he's not that level of athlete. So I think those are some of the things that people were buying into when they rated him so high preseason, and those were some of the things that maybe we were going to start to see at Michigan against better competition in a really good Big Ten conference. But we haven't even gotten to the major slate of the Big Ten schedule yet, and he's already struggling against some of the defenses he's faced. Now he's faced like Seton Hall, for example. Kadari Richmond is one of the better perimeter defenders in the country, so that was definitely a test that I'm sure everybody had circled to watch on their calendar. But even in some of these other games where he hasn't faced primetime competition, he's kind of struggled to put it all together. And like I said, I buy the decision making. I buy the open spot up shooting or some of the things you can have him do off the move. But if you're having him look to create more inside the arc for himself, I'm just not buying it. And if that's really where he's going to lack in his game, some of the defensive concerns set aside as well, why are we looking to necessarily take that player in the lottery? I think that's why he's fallen.
Man, that's a conversation a lot of NBA teams are currently having too. And I don't want to completely bash them either because
I
we
don't
all
either.
no, 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 no. This is a fair analysis, but my
Mhm.
follow up to it is that there's enough guys in the NBA who have more I'd like to politely call like nuanced games, like Kyle Anderson, where he's not blown by anybody, he's not dunking over anybody, better handle for sure, but like he gets
Yep.
by on his feel as opposed to I have a really quick first step. I'm going to beat you, then stop on a dime and pull up. Like he's never been that player. He's carved out a role. I don't know if you take that guy in the top 5, but a lot of times the limitations we see, there's teams that say, "Hey, I like there's enough clay for me to mold and work with that." I meant physical clay, not Clay Thompson, just to be very very clear. So like that type of mind frame mindset, and I'm constantly trying to evolve as just a casual evaluator of why this guy worked in the NBA and this guy didn't. And sometimes it does boil down to what your developmental program is as a
Yep.
franchise. Do they get as a siren goes by in the sidelines? That's not an emergency for Caleb Houstan. I did not call that yet. That was premature. Uh,
Give it like 2 weeks, we might be ringing that siren.
yeah,
But
yeah, we'll hit that's the actual panic button that's going behind me. It's not in my apartment. It's outside. Somebody's saying he's not that good. 20 range. That's where he's sitting right now. I mean, the stock. He had a good IPO, and now it's kind of tanking down a little bit.
so one of the areas that I haven't quite seen bear itself out in the numbers quite yet is I really like his feel and his understanding of how and where and when to be in transition. And I think that can be a major asset to an NBA team and another selling point as to why he's such a valuable offensive player if that truly comes around for him. You put that in again with the movement shooting. If he's not this type of creator off the bounce that a lot of teams would like to project him as, I know where you said you have him on your board. Where do you think that player ultimately falls draft time if he doesn't make improvements in some of those areas, and or he also doesn't show some defensive improvement as well? Because he's been bad at times on that. And for as much as I want to praise him for some of the off ball stuff that he showed very early on in the year, where he was creating some deflections, forcing some turnovers, he's also been pretty bad in some individual coverages. And then you've seen some of that leak out into the off ball stuff as the years gone on.
Also, I want to give him a little bit of credit too, because the Canadian thing during FIBA, he played like a legitimate big guardish type role, and
Yes, he
his assist
did.
numbers weren't bad. So I also don't want to say like there's also times where guys just kind of play their role, and that's what they're asked to do. And he's not going to try to become this crazy self-creating wing where Juwan Howard and the Michigan staff just might be like, hey, run wide. We're going to get you some open looks, some quick hitters, make some passes, throw some lobs at the rim for Musa, or hit Hunter Dickinson, then cut off. And his role could be very different in the NBA. And well, a
I'm
guy
glad.
that
I'm glad you said roll. Hang on, I got to cut you off really quick because this is the real question that I wanted to ask you, and I was forgetting it.
oh,
It
good,
was drawing a blank.
good.
But so his role at Michigan, I'm glad that you used that word. It seems like he doesn't necessarily have a clean fit within the offense, and it's sort of like there's a bunch of possessions you'll watch during the game where he kind of has to clean up the scraps. And given
Yes.
all the concerns that we've laid out, like that is not his role. So like
No.
if they were using him in a better way to better match his skill set, if they were actually drawing up more sets to actually run him off of more screens, or get some double screen actions going for to get him better open, are we having a different conversation?
Could be because maybe it's also a trust issue where Hunter Dickinson, he has his strengths, he has his weaknesses, but you know what you're getting for the most part on a Hunter Dickinson. So if you're going to hit him in the high post, you're going to hit him in the post. He's
Yep.
scoring at a pretty high clip. Yes, he can't move his feet, whatever. But like that's a known commodity. Where Caleb Houstan, if you're not shooting it well, now all of a sudden you have the last 6 games, maybe there are more sets where I say, hey, let's get Caleb a quick one. Let's get a double screen. The next time Hunter slips, he'll hit him. He's got really good vision. It may evolve as the season does too. But for where he is currently, maybe he is just like a spot guy that runs wide. And I watch a lot of full games, and also I'll go back after the fact and watch synergy because you do feel like you miss pieces. And if you just click on offensive possessions for a guy like him, man, there are stretches where it's like, wait a minute, this play was a 17 minutes left, whatever, and then the next offensive possession he has that lists as a stat is like 9 minutes left. It's like, what happened those 8 minutes in the middle? Even if you're on the bench for 4 or 5, and what happened that 4 minute stretch where you didn't take a shot, you didn't make a read off the dribble, you didn't miss a shot. It's having him leave more of an impact too and be able to have his role what it is now and be able to show he can do more. And he's not. I keep going back to the old draft. I'm not saying he's Scotty Barnes because Florida State is very different. But Florida State's a program where guys kind of play 20 minutes a night and they've become a factory of we'll build up the fundamentals, we'll build up everything you do well, but there could be stuff beyond the surface that you have. And that's happened with Scotty Barnes. His jumper's better. We've seen
Yep.
Caleb Houstan. There's been breadcrumbs of him of being more of a facilitator, being more of a wing initiator than he's been able to show at Michigan. No shade at all for what they've done. I think Juwan Howard is incredible. I think Phil Martelli does a great job on the bench with him. They're going to put him in positions to be successful. It's more of a slower thing and not an immediacy that we may have anticipated in the preseason.
I agree wholeheartedly. He's another guy that maybe if we give him a little more seasoning, some things change up in Michigan. They find different ways to get him going. Maybe we are having a different conversation. Probably not the top six, top seven conversation that we might have once had in the preseason, but maybe he creeps back up at least into the late lottery. And that's kind of where he finds himself as we get closer to the draft. Now, here we get into two or three guys. I think the debate can be much more fascinating than those two. I kind of wanted to ramp up the anticipation for my audience here a little bit. So I've waited to talk about Jaden Hardy again for a while on my podcast just
Let's do
because
it.
I
Let's do it. I'm
haven't I
excited.
haven't
I'm
been
excited.
keeping up with the G League Ignite enough. And I also wanted to give a little bit of time to let pass the Scoot Henderson hype train that I've seen on social media. Everybody's like calling him, like Jesus walking on water over here, and I'm like, guys,
Yes.
like hang on, hold on,
I,
let's let that pass.
I tried to slow it down. Try to slow it down with Sam a little bit. I said, "Hey man, he's got 3 really good games. I don't be prisoner of the moment here." Everyone's like, "No, he's the best prospect we've ever seen. He is Michael Jordan and LeBron James." If they're, it's like, just come on. He's 17. He's played well. I really really like him. Top 3 pick. Let's see more. Sorry to cut you off, but yeah, it's crazy.
No, no, it's a cutoff that's warranted because I feel like you can't talk about the G League Ignite and not talk about Scoot. And I dove deeper in the last 2 days, and I've gotten much better exposure to him now, along with some of these other guys since some of my preseason pods that I was doing. And man, I mean, it's not. I don't even think. I mean, sure, Michael Jordan and LeBron is hyperbole, but in terms of calling him like the best guard, I think that I've been trying my hand at scouting, whether I've been trying individual work myself or whether I've been working for a private firm or working with a collective. I've been trying my hand at this for about 11 years.
Mhm.
And in that span, I can't think of a better point guard prospect that I've tried to evaluate, even this early on, than Scoot Henderson. Some of the things he does on the court, his understanding, his pace, how he plays the game, that you cannot understate that, or you can't overstate that enough. How he plays the game, I love it. He's a 3 level scoring guard, even when he's not taking a bunch of threes. And it's like, well, maybe that's the one area in his game that he can work on over the next 2 years to really solidify himself in that number one conversation. And you see him just casually spotting up for threes and just nailing them with ease. And you're like, okay, he doesn't even have to work on that either. So I don't know what else to say about him, but it is warranted to talk about him a little bit because then you try and evaluate Jaden Hardy for this draft class. And it makes it so incredibly difficult to give Hardy a fair shake because Scoot is doing all of these crazy astronomical things at 17 years old in the G League. And I know that you and Sam have talked about that
Yeah.
on the Game Theory pod as well. But when we're looking at Jaden Hardy, I'm curious where you had him preseason. I had him as the fourth guy on my board before the whole Jaden Ivey explosion. And even right now, at this current moment in time, going off of my 1.0 big board, I didn't slide him down too far. I slid him down to 6. But I'm curious where you had him initially preseason and kind of where you're at right now.
4 or 5. Excuse me. I think 4 or 5. I think I had Jalen Duren a little bit higher. I did not have Ivy as high. I got Pat Baldwin ahead of him, but no deeper than 5. And I currently have him ninth, and I feel like that's still being a little generous to what he showed. And I get it that like Scoot is an extraterrestrial in a good way, just like this crazy prospect that combines power and skill and strength and to overuse the word nuance, like coming off pick and rolls, it's a different look every time. It's stop and go. He hits the jet, whatever. But he looks so far beyond of where Jaden Hardy is.
Yep.
And they just had the G League showcase out in Las Vegas, and they played on TV in prime time against the Austin Spurs, and Josh Primo, who's near and dear to my heart, like thoroughly outplayed him. Like it wasn't close, and there were enough scouts there that kind of sent texts and said, not like this is your king, but more so like this is a top five guy. And we talk about sample size a lot, and I don't think it's necessarily fair. But here's the actual numbers. He's shooting 35% from the field. He's shooting
Yep.
27% from three. So if you're a scorer and I'm drafting a scorer, that to me, with those numbers, in order to get said points, you're gonna have to be a volume guy. If I'm drafting somebody 4 or 5, I don't know if I want Jaden Hardy to be my volume-ish type scorer. There's also been some dialogue, I guess is a good way to put it, saying that, well, what about Jalen Green? Like Jalen Green shot 45% from the field. He was 50% his first half of games. He had 3 straight 20-plus point game performances in games 2, 3, and 4. And I thought that Jalen Green, the difference with his G League Ignite experiences, he was kind of taking the shortcomings. In the first game, he was bad. He was just sped up a million miles per
He
hour.
was awful.
Yeah, and I'm watching, and I'm like, all right, just patience. Let's watch a little bit. He played 15 games. Jaden Hardy's played 12. Jalen Green has taken his lumps in the NBA, as all rookies will. Everyone's going to hit a
Yep.
wall at some point. I'm just more concerned that Hardy's wall is a little bit sooner. I mean, he's below average on most synergy categories. I think he looks pretty lost on drives. He forces into these small windows, not only for a shot, but for passes. Doesn't really look for cutters. His handle's loose. I do like his shot. I mean, I know the numbers will say, like, you're crazy for saying that. He has really good range, has really good touch. He's making it difficult for himself and with kind of just like, all right, just reverse the ball, cut through, get a different look. You don't have to come off this double
Yep.
and shoot it every single time. And the next step for him is you're playing this level of competition of guys in the G League who are fringe NBA players or rookies or really good. And Scoot Henderson roasted Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody that game. They played the Santa Cruz Warriors or whatever the name they are. So you have to give Jaden Hardy a little bit of the benefit of the doubt that saying if he was at Oregon or he was at Kentucky or he was at Memphis, would his numbers be better? Would his shooting, scoring stuff be better? Yes. Have to see more if he's going to be in the top 5 conversation.
So here's what I wrote specifically about Jaden Hardy, and you outlined some of the shooting splits, the concerns. I think the one, if we're going to put it into a numbers context, I think even just looking at the box score and his shot attempts per game from the field overall, he's taking 17 shots per game, and he's only making 6 of them. So I think that enough. You don't even have to put it in a percentage. If you're telling me that you're bringing a guy who you know is going to take 17 shots per game within your offense and he's only going to make 6 of them, that immediately is going to turn off so many people. And coaches are not going to want to feed him the ball and have him work out of volume. You just give him those 2 numbers right there. But I agree with you. I like the shot. I don't think I've ever not liked the shot. I think those percentages will definitely keep coming around. I know he's definitely had a better December than in November. And now that we're out of like the Showcase Cup slate and they're playing some of these different exhibition games in January and February, we'll see if any of that comes along. He is shooting 88% from the free throw line. So that's also an indicator of he has the touch. Is it just more about the types of shots he's taking or the types of shots he's able to take within the offense? My biggest concern, Matt, I will go and I'll watch some of these games and against like Oklahoma City Blue, for example, where at the end of that game he absolutely took over from a shot making perspective. He looked like the type of guy that you would want to take with like a top 5, top 6 pick. It wasn't just that he was making every three that he looked at. And when he was able to get himself free around the basket, he was showing some floater game. He'll have these tough finishes where he's actually finishing through contact. He's built well for a guard. I cannot get beyond his lack of a handle. It's so apparent. It is really ugly at times. It seems every time he tries to go to like a combination move to shake a defender, he loses the ball clumsily and he
Right.
turns it over. And that, along with his lack of elite explosiveness off a first step, that doesn't allow him to cleanly get past defenders from the top either. He's just not the cleanest dribbler of the basketball. Like he'll have some of these where he tries to get by somebody and he's whipping out this like high waisted dribble on his right, and it's like, dude, if you're doing that in the NBA, somebody smart is just going to rip that ball away from you within a half second, and like they're going to be racing down the other end of the court, and your coach is going to look at you, and you're going to look at your coach, and he's just going to be really pissed off, and you're just all you're going to have to do is like hang your head. Like that's the type of stuff that awaits you if you're trying to whip something out like that in the NBA, and that's really the part of his game that concerns me the most, and I think that leads him into the most trouble. Have you kind of seen and heard the same things from other scouts?
Similar. I believe I don't have his full box cumulative stats here, but I think it's negative assist to turnover too, which is a little
Yep.
concerning. And if that's the case, then where do you slot him as a place on the floor? I'm never one person to say like you're a one, you're a two, you're three, whatever. If he's not the primary ball handler, which he has been getting a lot of reps, and
Yes.
look, it's I don't want to give him a completely get out of jail free card. Playing at Coronado High School in Nevada and playing on the EYBL for Las Vegas Elite, it's just different when you're playing against a 29-year-old man who's trying to get a 10-day. And know that as Jalen Green said in an article last year, or Brian Shaw did in an interview, you have this enormous target on your back because people are coming after you every single game possession because they know scouts are watching. Because you have 30 NBA teams who are watching, saying, if we get a pick or we can move up, we have to watch him. We have to watch Marshawn Beauchamp. We have to see where Dyson Daniels is at. So the eyes are biggest on this G League Ignite team. But I've always seen him off the ball. But if you're an off the ball guy at 6'4" or so, you turn it over a lot. The shooting percentages aren't there. I don't really love your reads. That's what kind of like scares me the most. Which which is tough because it's like shoot, dribble, pass. What are you scared of? Yes, like I am.
Yes, all of them.
I don't know what you do with that.
So my last question about Hardy, and not to turn this into a first take, hot take type of segment here, but you gotta wonder all of the buzz that Scoot has now generated. You're coming into the elite showcase in Vegas. Every single scout from every team that's there is just talking about, oh, look at this kid Scoot Henderson, like how good is he? Like they're already talking about the 2023 draft. They're kind of leaving you and some of your teammates in the dust. Like from a pressure perspective, that has to mount so much on his shoulders, whether he would ever admit it or not. We know he wouldn't admit it, but that just has to play into his game from a psychological perspective. And maybe he is trying to do a little bit too much off the dribble. Maybe he is trying to experiment and do some things that he might not be fully comfortable with doing at this level. But it's like, well, Scoot's doing it. So if I can't do it, if I can't show this, then where am I going to fall? Like, I don't know if
Yeah,
you have any other comment on that, but like that
I
has to
do.
be
I do.
part of it.
It's a little bit. Josh Primo's 6 months younger. He didn't seem phased.
Yeah, him
Like
too.
that. Like that. Josh Primo releases it, and for people who haven't followed the game theory, I was very very high on Josh. I wasn't 12 high. Like I don't want to be that guy, but I had him
I
at
wasn't
15 or
either, but like Josh was one of those guys you just watch him like at the very early on in Alabama, and you look at him and you're like 6'5", 6'6", true combo guard with that size. Like how many combo guards do we give that label to? How many of them actually have his size, his measurables, and his shooting ability? Like that type of player is growing
right,
trees.
with a lot of NBA teams not knowing that he can play on the ball and makes really good
Right.
reads on a pick and roll, and yeah, his turnovers are too high, but like whatever. He put on a show in front of 30 NBA guys. What I'm drawn back to is I remember a high school game last season. It was on ESPN or ESPN, actually it was ESPN2, and it was Imani Bates in the Ypsi Prep against Chet Holmgren and Minnehaha Academy. And all the stories about Imani, yes, of course, Chet was a top 2 to 3 kid. Like, I'm not saying Chet Holmgren came out of some cave somewhere. It's like, oh, where's this 7-foot unicorn been? Wherever. I love Chet. I've had him in the top 3 pick like forever. Whatever. My point was that game they went blow for blow. Chet outplayed him. Period. Like if you're watching the game, you know Chet outplayed him. And there was a play where Chet's at half court. He puts it behind his back. He beats a guy, beats Imani, and then dunks at the rim. The FC Prep calls timeout. And I don't know exactly what Chet said, but he's screaming at the camera. He's screaming after the bench, basically being like, I'm him. I'm him. This is what I do. So there's 2 paths that you can take. You can do that and be like, all right, I know you're all here to see Imani. I know he's the best prospect since Kevin Durant or whatever, but like, I'm the guy. I'm that dude. There's an opportunity for Jaden Hardy to do that. It didn't happen. And I even think that like Scoot Henderson was good that game. He wasn't great. You see it. You're like, holy crap, the kid's 17. But I take it more as an opportunity where it's pressure is a privilege, as people would say. Like you have a chance to kind of announce all the haterade, all the negativity, and here's an actual showcase to do it. Throw your numbers out the window, and he was just whatever. I thought it was a missed opportunity for him to kind of right his track back into like that top 8 conversation.
I will be seeing him at the end of January when the G League Ignite team comes through to the Philly area. I know Corey's going to see him the week prior when the G League Ignite team is facing off against Long Island, and we're probably going to do a podcast after that. And I promise, when I'm at the arena or when we're doing that podcast, I'm going to try so hard to not just make it 45 minutes or 100 tweets about Scoot Henderson. I promise everybody,
Yeah.
I'm going to try.
Good,
I'm going to try my
good
hardest.
luck. Good luck. You know what sells, man. You do. Like the internet's a weird thing where sometimes you put out a tweet, you're like, I don't know, do I get 10 likes? Do I get 5 retweets? I put out just like some dumb tweet again about Scoot, about how he didn't need the benefit of time. He was 17. Here's his points. It took off. I mean, he's
Right.
an attraction. I think a lot of casual fans have started to like really like him too. And it's amazing. It's incredible what he did. But luckily, you guys will have eyes on him and a number of prospects, and not just independent of our
I
school.
can't wait. I cannot figure out Dyson Daniels offensively for the life of me. So I'm really intrigued to see him up close. I know I've seen everything about the defense. I've evaluated the defense. The defense is awesome. I think Sam answered a question on his mailbag where he posed, I think Alex from our team actually posed the question. It's like, is Dyson Daniels the best guard defender in the draft? The answer to that question is probably yes. I just don't know what he does in the court at a trustworthy level offensively, other than pass the ball. But that's a different topic, I suppose, for a different day. We could probably sit here and talk like
That's
20
another
minutes.
dive.
But Peyton Watson out of UCLA, good God, another prospect who has just seen the free fall come in on his stock. Average stock price before the season 9.8, and that's kind of where I had him. I believe I had him about 9-ish on my board, somewhere in that 9 to 10 range. Now you see that cost come in at about 24.2 is the average price that Corey outlined across major outlets. So again, another similar to Caleb Houstan, another steep fall, but a steeper fall. Now we're talking like 14 or 15 spots. And it's gotten to the point. I mean, preseason, he was a name that was trending for me in the top 10 as one guy who could kind of like break into that top 5 of the class. But now you look, it's like, is he even going to go in the first round? How much first round stock does Payne Watson even have at all? So I'm kind of curious, Matt, where you are on his game. It's really funny. I joke with Tyler and Albert on our team all the time. They were actually out in Vegas. They saw him in person at the Bellarmine game, and it's like, you probably saw the one awesome Peyton Watson game potentially
Yeah.
all college year. But it's like, other than that, what has he really done on the court to get you excited? So I'll give you the floor, Matt. The floor is yours. Where are your thoughts right now on Peyton Watson?
I'm laughing because it's like all these we start and it's been sort of like negative, and these guys are all really good prospects. They're all NBA players. So I don't want this to think that. I don't know. I don't think there's too much more to say. I mean, he's playing 14 minutes a night. It's been closer to 10 minutes a night lately. He was this late bloomer in high school, so he was this guard growing up and hit a growth spurt. And I'm a sucker for those stories that all of a sudden they're wing and have the guard skills, and now all of a sudden it works. I love what UCLA has done and built. I was concerned he wouldn't get a lot of burn early with them returning their entire Final Four team, plus Rutgers transfer Miles Johnson. I knew it'd be a logjam for minutes no matter what. So he's never really gotten going. I mean, you alluded to that Bellarmine game where he had 19 points in 20 minutes. You know, I chopped up some clips and said, all right, there's something here for sure. This could be a one and
Yep.
done guy. That was on Monday, November 22nd. That was also the last time he scored a field goal in a game. Like, think about that. It's end of December here. We're trudging on to the new year. He hasn't scored a field goal in a month. So I give him an incomplete grade. I hope right now he comes back to school and is actually like the man in a year. I like his size. I like his tools. He's going to be a stud. If he did declare, he is a candidate. I would do the pre-draft or the domestic draft and stash move in the late 20s. get him in my G League affiliate, get him a ton of reps if I trust my developmental coaches. And maybe in 2 years, say, man, we stole one there late in the 20s. If he comes back to school next year, maybe he's a top 7, 8 guy. I don't know how a team that high could take a chance, a risk with just like the lack of playing time, yes, but scoring and limited action that you're able to assess right now in the college space.
So I keep giving Corey all of this like big brain credit on my podcast. Like, damn it, I gotta stop doing that. Like, I'm the host of the podcast. I'm supposed to be the smartest person here. But he said something. We recorded an episode of his podcast, the Draft Deck, and we talked about Peyton Watson. And I kind of put it out there that I don't see the situation at UCLA getting any better this year. Like, Mick Cronin wants to win. He's one of my favorite coaches in all of college basketball, and he's got plenty of vets in front of Peyton Watson to kind of feed and take care of. And those guys are probably much better off at winning the games that this UCLA program is expected to win than trying to draw up things for Peyton Watson to get involved in the offense to make him feel more comfortable. Because it just seems like his confidence on the court, if you watch, especially like from these last 4 games, like it's just gone. His confidence just seems gone on the offensive end, and he's not even as active on the defensive end at this point either. I don't think this results in him coming back to UCLA. I can't, for the life of me, see him transferring to another school. But Corey brought up a point that I thought was really fascinating. What if he wouldn't enter his name into the draft, and he would actually go to the G League Ignite team next year? What if something like that? What if an experiment like that worked out and he was able to boost his draft stock up all the way back to where it was preseason? Do you think there's any chance that something like that could happen for him? Because I thought that was a really fascinating point to make.
Sure, I don't see why not. I mean, the G League Ignite had significant interest in him before UCLA. Like, there was a chance that he was going to go there initially, as opposed to
Yep.
going to college. So, could you build, I don't want to say a super team, but a team with him if Imani Bates says, "Yeah, college isn't for me," and that's kind of like a 1-2 punch with Scoot Henderson coming back, which is weird to say a guy is coming back at 17 years old to a pro team, but we're in a weird space in the world right now. There's a chance. There is. I mean, maybe he needs more pro reps. He's going to get plenty of them at UCLA. I still believe in the developmental stuff that they have there, and just the college, I guess, experience too. So I don't want to write him off. I hope he goes back. I don't have any inside information on what he would do, but does have different avenues to pursue. I
Yep.
hope it's not the full NBA thing. I hope if he stays, if he goes, wherever it is, he's a year away from the draft, because he does need work and what's forgotten. And I find myself having a hard time with this too, is that his season was messed up, his high school season. I don't think they played in California till like February or March. Basically, like when college season was over, his was beginning again. And we're becoming a different type of player, and you need so many reps, and those reps are kind of snatched away from you. Now you're not getting game reps, rightfully so, at UCLA. You're just playing from behind. So it's time for him. I hope it's just not a rush process here. He's very, very good. He's going to be in the NBA, just a matter of when.
I think he's good too. And we talk about some of the negativity on this podcast. I don't want it to be all negative either, because I think that I've still remained and will remain maybe not as high as I once was on some of these guys preseason that we've talked about, but I think I'm going to remain in on them as prospects. And the thing about Watson, I heard this little nugget on one of the game when I was watching. One of the announcers was talking about how Watson was being groomed a little bit in early practices as kind of this pick and roll type of initiator within the offense. Like, they wanted him to handle more responsibility as like this jumbo type point guard. I never saw him coming in as somebody who would have responsibilities like that or be able to excel with responsibilities like that. I thought, if anything, if he's doing anything off the dribble, it'd be like a 1-2 dribble type of pull up shot that he creates for himself. And other than that, he's attacking a closeout. He's finding ways to get to the basket off the ball. He's running out in transition and throwing down his thunderous dunks that are all over YouTube highlights that you can find from his high school days. And then obviously his defensive activity being one of the more underrated shot blockers that I thought coming in preseason in this draft class. His weak side help ability, I thought, was tremendous with some of the high school stuff I saw. But that creation role, do you think that him being possibly overly encouraged to tap into some of that when he's gotten to UCLA. Maybe that's stripped away a little bit of confidence for him. Like, oh, if I can't do this, like now where am I going to be at in the NBA? You think maybe they tried to feed him a little too much even behind closed doors?
Maybe, and I don't want to totally speculate, but he did
Sure.
when he was at Long Beach Poly High School. He did a lot of that initiation. I know we often get away. I mean, we as a basketball kind of prospect type world, you can get away with doing more stuff at the high school level where you build bad habits, but at the same time, you can form good ones too.
Yep.
Whereas I had the same conversation with Sam on the game theory pod about Chet Holmgren. He said, "Well, I don't really know if he can create. I don't know if he can dribble that much." I said, "No, he can. I mean, I saw it through the grassroots circuit, and he wasn't a point guard, but he can be a second side guy where he can go off the dribble for 2 or 3, and then pull up or find a cutter or go behind the back and spin." Chet and Peyton, I think, have simplified their games down so much to fit what's asked of them that I am a believer that Peyton Watson can be a little bit of a guy that comes off screens in that don't hold me to it, but Evan Mobley did the same thing at USC, and people are like, I don't know, that's kind of like crazy. I think they're just feeding into it because he went there. Whatever, he's doing some stuff with that with the Cavs. So there's more to what we're seeing with Peyton Watson. There's more to what we're seeing with AJ Griffin. Some of these other guys, like Jaden Hardy's got the shots, he's got the attempts. Caleb Houston's getting the playing time. Some of the guys just have to dig and wait and be patient. And we're so quick to have takes and opinions on anything. And this is just like reading another chapter of the book. Like maybe this is like a slower one, but you turn a few
Yeah.
more pages and Peyton Watson's going to be a guy that it won't surprise me if and when he shoots up. I also am just hesitant on getting too high on him right now and saying there's so much there. This is the Josh Primo. This is the guy that should go 12th because there hasn't been the flashes. I mean, hasn't scored a field goal in a month. That's all.
It's, speaking of the Josh Primos of the draft class, Matt, the biggest reason why I wanted to click that follow button on your Twitter account was because you mentioned Josh Minot's name on your on Sam's
Yeah,
podcast. I was like, all right, this is my kind of dude. Like I'm all in. I like Josh too, but and you keep mentioning Chet Holmgren. God, I love Chet. I freaking love Chet. Maybe I got to have you on to do another podcast where we talk about Chet because I still love
yeah,
that dude. I'm not.
we can do that. I always kind of default back to him just because his arc I've been able to follow, but
Yep.
there's also it's kind of like these translatable stories where you got to take your time. Guy does develop. Guy does have to seize the moment, and he's been a player that has done that. That's all.
Maybe a little teaser for my audience. I refuse to put him lower than 2 on any big board. I just can't do
I'm
it.
the same. I'm the same. I know his
So
limitations, but I'm the same.
so last but not least, we'll run through Mr. Patrick Baldwin pretty quickly because if you have listened to my podcast before, you know that I made my impassioned Bolden stance on Patrick Baldwin with one of the Monday podcasts I did with Tyler Rucker. Look, I know what everyone said about him. I know that he hasn't performed in the games that arguably matter the most on his schedule. I get it. But his situation, the context around his situation, I can't think of a prospect who's had this lofty of expectations. And you would think that they're going to some awesome blue blood program, yet they go to play for their dad at I guess technically a mid major program. Feels like a low major type of program, even though they're in the Horizon Conference. And he's as talented as he is. He's playing on a bad basketball team, and he kind of just has to figure everything out as he goes. And he's being sort of looked upon to be the savior within the offense for the team. And that might not be who he ultimately is. I think the numbers and
Exactly.
the film would actually say that up to this point. However, how many 6'9", 6'10" guys who can shoot jump shots off the dribble like they're absolutely nothing from virtually anywhere on the court, who can operate within an offense in terms of all the off ball, the movement type of stuff. I have full confidence in his game from that perspective. And then you talk about defensively, some of the things that he does defensively, protecting the rim as well. Like I just see him as this unique talent. I had him 6. No. I had him 5 on the 1.0 edition of my big board, and I'm at a point where some of these other guys that we may be talking about in the future, guys like Johnny Davis and Benedict Mathurin. Um, some of these guys might propel themselves ahead just because they're playing that well. But even if I'm moving Patrick Baldwin slightly down my board, I'm not moving him down because of the public criticisms to his game and kind of some of the performances and where he's been. And I think his situation is just so unique, but I'm still 100% all in on him as a basketball talent. Like if I get to the point where I slide him down a little bit, like 10 for me is the furthest that I'm going in terms of moving him down. I refuse to be all out on this guy. I'm still all in on the Patrick Baldwin train. Where are you at, Matt? What are some of your thoughts to close out this podcast wall on Patrick Baldwin's situation as a whole and where you're at on his evaluation?
Ooh, heavy. I
It is
really liked him.
heavy.
Really liked him in the preseason. Really liked him in high school. I understand going to Milwaukee, playing for your dad. He was much more of an alpha his last high school season, where he had more of, I'm going to put the team on my back. I'm going to score for a quick post. I'm going to hit a step in three from the volleyball line. I thought that Milwaukee wouldn't be great, but I also thought that he would have this ability where they stunk, but he'd have 26. He'd miss some shots. I thought it'd be more like he shot 39% from the field, but had 27 points, had 6 turnovers because he really had to force and do everything. Like
Hmm.
that Rhode Island game, he just kind of reversed the ball and checked out. And when you talk to people around, you talk to scouts, that's what's turned him off the most. It's not the size, the shooting, and how he's able to self-create just a sliver of space. He needs to get off his jumper with a really high release. I like his balance. It's not that. It's that when they're losing on the road at Florida, and here comes the press, he's okay just kind of like reversing the ball, cutting through, maybe won't like split his man in half and do a post and call for it, say, hey, I'm getting a touch. It's that lack of consistent fight is what worries me. The skill set, it's hard for me to get past 10 too. I totally agree with you there. But my visions of him as Mr. Everything for Milwaukee are different. That's what's showing on the court.
I look at this situation and I can't imagine some of and some of these points that we brought up, you and I both said we're purely speculating in some of these avenues, but I can't get myself around some of the mental gymnastics that are probably going on within this situation. It's just like I'm one of those people that can very well sympathize and understand situations and kind of keep that context in firm perspective. I can't get around what's probably been going on for him just personally and with some of the things that he's hearing and some of the things that are said about him and where he's at right now in terms of the public eye. I kind of want to just throw this year out as a wash. And I know that as a scout, you technically can't do that because it's part of the sample that goes into the evaluation for these guys. You can't just solely go off of high school. But I hated the situation that Cole Anthony was in as well when he was at North Carolina. And that's not even as comparable of a situation because North Carolina is a blue blood program. Wisconsin, Milwaukee is not. But I took the positives that I saw from the North Carolina situation, some of the things that he was able to do in games, various facets of his game, and I kind of took those and I also merged those with the context of the situation, and I let my evaluation ride, and I still remain very high on Cole Anthony, and I feel like I'm going to do the same here as you and I alluded to with kind of like our low point as to where we're going to rank him. Like I know it's not technically the right thing to operate and scout that way, but I just I don't have a good taste in my mouth when I'm trying to just come back so much to everything that Baldwin's gone through this year. Like I kind of just want to throw it out, and I don't know if you're going to operate the same way. I don't know if you're just going to weigh it a little less. Like I don't know where you're at in terms of a tough situation to talk about like this.
I have to see what it looks like in conference play too. I know I sound
Yeah.
like a broken record, but he's had these non-conference games, even that like head-to-head battle against Colorado. Jabari Walker, who I think is fine. I think he's probably an early second-round guy. Jabari Walker outplayed him. Like it wasn't close. It was winning time. It was the last 3-4 minutes, and he stood out as the guy that wanted the ball, that made steals, that made stops, forced Patrick Baldwin into bad shots. I like the comparison you made for situationally Cole Anthony at North Carolina. Cole Anthony also scored it a lot and a lot better than Patrick Baldwin did. With Patrick Baldwin, what I can't remove myself from, what I can't quit
The
on Patrick Baldwin
assertiveness.
is him being 6'9" and being able to shoot and be able to stretch the floor. Those guys don't just come around every year. And a guy that was the reports out of USA Basketball this summer were very good, very skilled. Don't know if he's ever going to be like the actual guy. Needs time to develop, but man, he takes the coaching. He's a very fast learner. He picks up concepts. He just might not be the cornerstone top 5 pick, and that's okay. But I can't move him down all the way in the 20s because I've seen it too much. You have to weigh what's going on right now in Milwaukee. I'm sure it's a ton of pressure. The microscope is much larger, which sounds funky because you're at a mid-major, but every catch, someone's expecting you to score, to do something. And maybe that's just too much for where he's at his age, and people process it differently with those type of pressures. I really like him though. It's I hope that he kind of figures it out because he's what you look for the archetype of a wing that does so much. And I know that the percentages aren't great either. It's because he has forced. I actually wish he'd force it more. I wish that he would take 25 shots a game, and when they double team, you finally hit the roll man or somebody cross
Well,
court.
so one thing I kind of noticed too, though, Matt, is that his team sort of like ices him out
Oh
at
yeah,
different
yeah.
points during the game too, and
It's a
that's really
it's a
weird.
wild watch sometimes when the guards like look at him, look off, reverse. It's like no, get him the ball every single play. Or if you want to do the decoy, if you want to do the Steph Curry back in the day when at Davidson when he was double teamed or triple teamed, he just like stands off in the corner. And you want to play 5-on-4, great, do that too. But they don't even take advantage of him as a decoy, which is funky.
Like I distinctly remember a few possessions during the Colorado game where like one of his teammates would get inside the arc, and they kind of like come to a little jump stop, and they'd have options if they establish the pivot foot to kind of turn. It's like Pat Baldwin's like waving his hand like right there on the wing, like, hey, I'm wide open. And it's like they just want to go elsewhere with the ball. And I truly wonder
Yeah,
how much of that dynamic, like
right.
that sucks too, because you talk about a lack of assertiveness that he's shown at different times, but it's like it's the other side of the coin too. If his teammates don't want to get him the damn ball, it's like what more can the guy do if he's actually getting himself open for a good shot and he's just not getting the ball? What more can he do? So I don't know. That factors in too for me.
No, you're absolutely right.
It's a wild ride.
It's hard. It is because it's hard to imagine too because we talked about AJ Griffin early in the show, so it's hard to say. Well, what if Patrick Baldwin Jr. was there? I don't know. Maybe he could be awesome. Maybe like we talk about who's number one, him or Paulo. Like which game is it with RJ Barrett and Zion and Cam Reddish? Maybe it's those situations, or maybe it is the AJ Griffin where doesn't have his feet under him yet, lacks confidence a little bit, doesn't always turn it on. He's playing 15 minutes a night. It's hard to play those games all the time, but you do wonder. You do wonder what if he had ended up there and not in Milwaukee.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for coming on this episode of the podcast. This was a lot of fun for me. I'm so glad that you and I were able to connect and do something like this. Hopefully, we can definitely do it again at some point during the 2022 draft cycle. If you can just give my audience a reminder, I'm sure that a lot of my listeners already know who you are. They're already following you. But if for whatever reason they don't listen to the Game Theory pod, can you just remind my audience where they can find you on social media, how they can find some of the things you're doing?
Absolutely. So social media, I'm on Twitter, Matt_Pennie. That's really my only social media account where I go full in as a draft nerd and not a functional member of society. And we talk about how good Patrick Baldwin Jr. is or not. Also, I'm a regular guest on the Game Theory podcast with Sam Vecini on The Athletic. That train doesn't stop either. I've had people say, like, how do you come up with something new to talk about every single week on prospects? I don't know, but we keep doing it. We record those once a week anyway. We just kind of transition that into video. So if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, Game Theory Podcast with Sam Vecini, that always helps too.
There's so many prospects to talk about every single week. You can batch them out really well. It's just how much do your listeners want to hear you talk about the 50th
Yeah.
guy on your board or not.
Well,
But
right, and that's what people don't necessarily understand either is the higher listener ones are the ones that are talking about the top 5 guys. When you're doing deep dives into like second round picks and mid-major darlings. There's a lot of people like, yeah, I'll check back in a week or two.
Well, if anyone's a frequent listener to this podcast, you know that I spent about 3 podcast hours going through tiers 4 through 7 on my big board. So you know what? We're draft deeper for a reason, damn it.
The takeaway is we all have problems. We all have deep issues that the draft should solve, but just makes it worse.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much again, everyone out there listening to this episode of the podcast. If you haven't subscribed already, make sure you are wherever you get your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Make sure you're following me on Twitter at Draft Deeper. Make sure you're following No Ceilings on Twitter at No Ceilings NBA. This is a light week of content for me. I'm kind of enjoying the holidays a little bit and also using this time, as I mentioned earlier, to dive deeper into some of the film on some guys that I haven't caught up with or haven't really seen at all yet this year up to this point. So while I'm doing that, you can expect a 2-part Monday morning dunk over on No Ceilings, Monday, January 3rd. I'm going to expound on some of my thoughts on the G League Ignite, John Montero from the Overtime Elite, as well as diving into some international guys a little bit who I definitely need to catch up and do a little bit of footwork on. So make sure you're definitely tuned in for that, as well as all of the content that we're pumping out over on the No Ceiling Substack. There aren't many written platforms out there who are publishing as much content daily on the NBA draft as we are. We're sickos. We pride ourselves in being sickos. We don't care. We love doing it. We love giving the audience new content to dive into each and every single morning. So thank you all again for showing support to the podcast. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. Stay safe. Happy New Year.